We will call to order the regular meeting of the City Council of the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri, to be held on Monday, July 19, 2021 at 7 p.m. in the City Council chambers at 301 South 5th Street. Our invocation will be delivered by Pastor Pamela Sharp from the Grace Christian Fellowship Church. And everyone, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance after the invocation.
Good evening, Mayor Davis and council. Men and women, thank you so much for your service. We really appreciate it. Shall we pray? Father, we just thank you tonight for this opportunity, Lord, to pray for these men and women as they make decisions for our city. I pray, Father, that their minds would be alert and that they would follow your voice as they make decisions. I pray for peace and prosperity on this council, on each of these people, on their homes. I pray that also for their businesses and everything that their hand touches. And Lord, you tell us that in your word that righteousness exalts a nation. And Lord, we know when we do things right and righteously, Lord, that the nation is exalted. And we know that that would be the same for state and our local government too. So, Lord, I just pray that every decision tonight is made with a righteous thought and, Lord, doing the right thing. And I just give you praise and thank you once again for each of these that give their time and energy. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Sharp.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Clerk Young.
Councilwoman Parson.
Here.
Councilwoman Fox.
Here.
Councilwoman Horton.
Here.
Councilman Smith.
Here.
Councilwoman Taylor.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cornman.
Here.
Mayor Davis.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Clerk Young. Our next item, number 5, presentation. We will have a presentation by Spire Gas Incorporated. We'll present the Silver Shovel Award to our city.
Right, good evening. My name is Todd Fagan. I'm the right-of-way, Director of Right-of-Way for Spire. With me I have Reggie Flowers, our Senior Right-of-Way Representative, and Steve McNeil, our Area Operations Supervisor. We'd like to thank you for letting us come here tonight, get on the agenda and talk a little bit about excavation safety. At Spire, safety is one of our core values. We have an internal safety department that is inspecting our crews every day. We have a damage prevention department that goes out and inspects damages, tries to find that root cause of what happened, educate the excavators to try to, prevent that from ever happening again. So we are very excited to come here again tonight, second year in a row for you guys, to award you with the Spire, it's very hard to say, Silver Shovel Award for continued commitment to safe digging practices. We started this last year. And the goal was, because we are so involved in safety, we wanted to recognize the other municipal partners, the public works departments that have that same level of commitment to safety as we do. So we created a Silver Shovel Award. The criteria is, 1, you have to be in our service territory. 2, you have to be a member in good standing with Missouri One Call Found its rules and regulations, not overcalling, not forgetting the call. There's a long list of rules that you have to do. To do it right, it takes an effort. And the big one is no at-fault damages for an entire calendar year. At-fault damage is when a third-party contractor will come in there, hit our lines, and they didn't follow the proper procedures. So we are back again to this year, second year in a row. Last year we had 5 cities that won it. And this year we had 8, but we only had 3 return or duplicate winners. And that is Jerry Lawson and his crew and his team. So if you could come up here, I'd like to, read the plaque and give it to you, and then see if we can get a picture with the guys there. Keeping our community safe together, Spire is proud to award the City of Poplar Bluff with the Silver Shovel Award for its continued commitment to safe digging practices. And as you can see, 19 and 20 is on there. We got a bunch of spots. We hope to come back here in 2021. So thank you very much. Great job. Come on up here, guys. No, you're fine. And thank you very much. And the one thing is in Missouri, in 2019, we were damaged 1,700 times in the state of Missouri. And then in 2020, it was 1,500 times. So more cities continue falling like that. We're to keep getting that number down, lower and lower and lower. And you guys had around 100 call-ins, no damages. It's a fantastic job. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, disclosure of interest. Any member of the City Council may disclose any possible conflict of interest dealing with either any item on the printed agenda or with any matter discussed at a previous meeting. Seeing none, citizens' input. Each person in the audience may take this opportunity to address the City Council on any matter which is not on the printed agenda. Okay, seeing none. Item 8, consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda are approved by a single action of the City Council. If any council member would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and considered separately, he or she may request to do so.
Mr. Mayor, we all received in our packet all of the items on the consent agenda. So with that being said, I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is accepted. Item 9, workshop items for discussion. Item A representative from Busnick, Hay, Rowe, Stroder, LLC, CPA will appear before the City Council to present the audit for the City of Poplar Bluff and municipal utilities for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2020. I apologize if I pronounce some of those word names wrong.
You did very good, very, very good, especially because you got the Stroder part right. That's my name. That's the important part right there. My name's Jeff Stroder. I'm the audit partner at Busnick, Hay, Rowe, and Stroder, and I'm here to kind of go over the results of the audit that we had. So appreciate you all having us here. We appreciate the opportunity to conduct your audit for you this year. I'll get right into it. I know that having a chance to discuss government finance is fascinating, and I hate to go by it too fast, but I'll do the best I can. As those of you who've heard presentations about your audit report before, a lot of this will sound very familiar. As you know, in the bound documents you have, what we have are 3 reports that we actually issue on your financials. The first report is a report on your financial statements themselves. The report explains that management is responsible for preparing the financial statements. In order to do that, management's responsible to design and implement and maintain internal controls over how we accumulate the information to be able to provide accurate and reliable information for the financial statements. Now, my job as the auditor is to gather evidence about whether or not those financial statements are fairly stated. I'm also responsible to consider the internal controls that are put into place, whether or not they are designed appropriately and whether or not they're operating effectively in order to be able to conduct my audit. So the real meat of this report is the next part of it. It explains that, in my opinion, these financial statements, your financial statements, are fairly stated in all material respects in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That's the technical language that's in there, but what that is, it makes it an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. That's the opinion that you want to get on your financial statements. There is another paragraph that follows it up that explains now that there is some additional information in this document that we have not actually put an opinion on. There's a section called Management's Discussion and Analysis. It's kind of management's narrative version of what happened during the year. There's also a lot of information that comes from the pension plan. A lot of that information we've not actually applied audit procedures to, but we've been through it, and that if we had noted anything that was not consistent with the financial statements that we'd audited, or anything that did not seem to line up with what we found and the evidence that we gathered, we would have worked with management to kind of work through that before we got to this point. That being said, there's also other information that is included in the financial statements, several of the supplementary schedules, other information that's required by outside sources like the federal government that we have applied procedures to, and we do extend our opinion to that other information, and we believe that that other information is also fairly stated in relation to the financial statements as a whole. The last part of that report explains that whenever I conduct an audit in accordance with government auditing standards, there are other reports that need to be issued in conjunction with that, and that other report follows it. That report is where I report what I find. Whenever I do an audit in accordance with government auditing standards, I have to, as I mentioned earlier, have that understanding of the internal controls, how they're designed, how they're operating. And I'm also responsible for testing the city's compliance with various laws, regulations, contracts, grant agreements, things that have a financial nature to them. And if I find any problems in those areas, this is where I would report those. I did, in this report, I mentioned a couple of deficiencies in the internal control structure that I wanted to mention to you. The city's policy and procedure manual requires all timesheets to be signed off with approvals from department heads before they go through the process of getting coded and paid. And we pulled 25 payroll transactions, and we found that 9 of them did not have documentation that approval process had taken place. There is possibility that was done, it just wasn't documented. So that was something that was not quite in accordance with the city's policy. So we made a recommendation that we do believe that's an important thing, and to place some extra attention on that in the future years. The next thing that we were looking at, the same policy and procedure manual requires some form of documentation to support every expenditure, and that expenditures greater than $500 should have documentation of approval from department heads. So we decided to take a look at payments for credit card bills. It's just been our experience with other audits that we work on that this is an area where sometimes these things are more likely to be missed if they're going to be missed. And we found 2 months where some of the receipts were not there with the invoices whenever the payments were made. And I believe they also did not have the documentation for the supervisory review. So we wanted to make that recommendation and make sure that documentation is all there before those bills are paid. The last thing that we wanted to mention in this area that the city code requires that on any contracts that exceed $5,000, that there is either a specific line item in the budget for it, or that this council approves those transactions. We noted Parks and Rec entered into a purchase agreement of about, I believe it was $183,000, and we did not have the documentation that that transaction had been approved in advance. So, that was just something we wanted to point out to just make sure that those happen the way that the policy manual requires it. So the other part of that report, though, had to do with compliance that I was mentioning, and we tested the city's compliance with a lot of different areas, and we found no instances of non-compliance that we would report here in this section. So that's 2 of the 3 reports that we have in this document. The last report that we issue is required by the federal government whenever your federal expenditures exceed $750,000. So during the year of the audit period, your federal expenditures were $16.2 million. Now, the bulk of that, $13.8 million, were draws from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund for construction, and there was just over $1 million worth of expenditures from the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and there was another $880,000 worth of expenditures from the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grants. So those were the 3 programs that we focused on. The requirements are that there's a complicated formula to decide which programs that we have to test to meet the coverage and the requirements. So these 3 programs were the ones that we focused our time on. They require us to give an opinion on whether or not you comply with their 14 basic compliance requirements that they require us to test. And not all of those apply to each grant, but they provide to us which ones they want us to test. And on all 3 of those programs, we found no instances of non-compliance with any of the federal requirements. So that's a clean opinion, another unmodified opinion. That's the one you want for your compliance with how you handle federal dollars. Now, they also require me to report whether or not you had internal controls in place over how we made sure that we complied. And for those compliance requirements, we had no problems, found no reportable conditions with the city's compliance requirements. However, there is a general provision. The federal government believes that the best way to ensure your compliance is that you would have written policies and procedures over how you're going to handle their money. It should address things like cash management policies, cost allowability policies, procurement, conflict of interest, a lot of things like this. And it was our understanding when we spent time working with the people administering these grants, it appeared that everybody had a good handle on what those requirements were and a good general knowledge, but there was no written policy. And the federal government is telling me that they consider that to be a weakness that I'm required to report. So we do mention that here. We tried to be very specific and intentional to let them know that there was no non-compliance. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. This is just kind of a paperwork issue. So it is my understanding that management is already working on putting those policies in place. So that's something that we'll hopefully to see. Those are the 3 reports we issue. I generally, when I talk to city councils about their financial statements, I don't spend a lot of time going back over the numbers. I don't know if that's something you expected from me or not, but I figure you're very familiar with your financial reports. You get those every month, and I know everybody's knowledgeable about that information, so it didn't seem like it was worth a lot of your time to go back over that information that's 6 months old now. One of the things I do think would be more useful to talk to you about is whether or not we made any significant adjustments. Sometimes when I'm auditing a city, they hand me their financial statements, and before I can put that clean opinion on it and be able to say they're fairly stated in all material respects, sometimes I have to suggest some pretty major adjustments be made before I can do that. And what I found here at the city was, I think we made 2 suggestions for very small adjustments, and they were reclassifications only. They had no effect at all on your total assets or your ending equities. They were simple reclass entries, and they were very small in relation to the financial statements whole. That's very rare from my experience working with cities, especially the cities the size of Poplar Bluff. So I wanted to offer that to you to give you an idea that you don't have to wait till after I come to do the audit to know that your statements were reliable for decision-making purposes, that they were pretty much as we opined on them when we got here to start. And that way the information that you were relying on to make decisions before the audit was done is pretty much the way they were reported on. So that's why I offer that information. There's a couple of more pieces of information I'm supposed to pass along to you. Whether or not this is important, I'm not sure, but I'm supposed to pass it along. While we were conducting our audit, we were looking to see about estimates that go into the city's financial statements, and sometimes that's required that there be estimates in there. The most significant estimates that we found had to do with depreciation calculations, estimated useful lives, proper methods to use for calculating depreciation. The other more significant estimates had to do with the collectability of receivables, whether or not they were good, reliable amounts, or whether or not they might be a little optimistic. But we found that all of the estimates that the city had in place in their financial statements were rooted in generally accepted accounting principles, and they appeared appropriate. So that went into our opinion. But something specifically I wanted to mention, we had no disagreements with management while we were conducting our audit as far as how to relate and apply accounting principles and the rules for reporting. And to our knowledge, there was no discussions with other auditors about opinion shopping or anything like that. So that's the nutshell version of your audit report and what we've reported on. I always like to try to answer any questions if anybody has any questions about what we did or what we were looking at and what we found while we were here doing the work. So if anybody would have any questions, I'd be happy to take a shot at it. So if there are no questions, one thing I like to pass along, and I promise we did not talk about this in advance. Some audits I have, I normally just keep quiet and go back and sit down at this point, but this is something where it was the case here I wanted to pass along. I don't know how many of you get a chance to be here on a day-to-day basis and see how things operate, when you're not around. But we found that management and all the employees that we had any dealings with were very professional. They treated my staff very respectfully and were very helpful. Everybody would kind of drop what they were doing in order to try to help us get the information that we were requesting. We really appreciate that. I like to think that that's the way they conduct themselves all the time. It may be possible that they believe as soon as the auditor gets what he wants, the sooner he'll go away. Either way, that was what we found, and I wanted to pass that along just so you know what our experience was with management.
Well, we thank you very much. I think most of us feel we have an excellent administration here with our manager and clerk and everyone. So, sounds like pretty good news to me. Are there any other questions from the council or discussion regarding the audit? Mr. Winters, would you like to elaborate on any of this?
No, I appreciate Mr. Strutter coming over tonight. This is our first year using them. I thought things went really well. A little bit different change internally with our new accounting manager and Laura that wasn't around last year when all this information was gathered, when all this stuff actually happened. And between her and Terry Leslie and Nevada, I know they tried to be as helpful as they could to Mr. Strutter and his staff, and we appreciate them coming over and working on this.
I know anytime there's a change in auditors, there's a little training for the auditor to not only learn who's responsible for what and who has what records, but sometimes it's terminology. We have to learn what everything's called at the new place. But from our perspective, for a first year engagement, everything went very smoothly, and and we hope to be able to continue that for you if you'd like to have us back.
Okay, we thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept this audit as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The audit is accepted. Thank you, sir. Workshop item B, the city council will review a recommendation for professional engineering services for the CDBG Industrial Infrastructure Grant project, and Mr. Winters will present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the application, the project that we discussed during our public hearing earlier for the CDBG Industrial Infrastructure Grant, we do have to select an engineer to prepare a preliminary engineering report, cost estimates, and then if the grant is awarded, we'll actually do the work. We advertised for qualifications from engineering firms. We had two we received, one from Smith & Company, one from Mathis. Myself, Jerry Lawson, he's not in here, and Bill Bach reviewed those two sets of qualifications and scored them, and are recommending we select Smith & Company to work on this project.
Is there any further questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion?
Motion to move this to the voting session on August 2nd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item C, the city council will consider a proposal for annexation of 2870 Fair Street, Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Our city manager will also present that.
Actually, I'm going to let City Planner James Sisk do that one. He's sitting right there in the front row just waiting to get up and speak. So this has been through planning and zoning already. So
This is property owned by John and Barbara Stokes. They approached the city about coming into the city limits. They're directly across the street from the water tower in the industrial park. So their general location, all the services are available. That piece of property and several of those on that side of Fair Street have always been in the county, and they've approached us as to come into the city at this point. And we're recommending they come in as a zoned RS2 residential.
Okay. Any questions from the council or the audience? If not, do we have a motion to move this to the voting session?
Make the motion that we move it to the August 2nd voting session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Item D, the city council will consider an agreement between the City of Poplar Bluff and the Missouri Department of Transportation relative to the replacement of the Business Highway 60 Pine Street westbound lane bridge, job J9S3381. Our city manager, Mr. Winters, will present this item.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a contract that I presented to you at our last meeting. There was a few things in there that kind of took issue with that MoDOT has gone back and amended. I think some of it was just kind of an oversight on their part. They had in there that we were going to maintain their sidewalks when they were done. So they've adjusted all that. I've reviewed it. Mr. Richardson's reviewed it. The street department has reviewed it, and the police department, there's some security things in there. The police department have reviewed it, and I would recommend that we approve this contract with MoDOT for them to replace that bridge, or this agreement with them.
Motion to move this to the voting session held on August 2nd.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item E, the city council, Item E, the city council will consider a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding a conditional use permit for a daycare center for up to 10 children in an RS1 rural residential district. The proposed location is 2880 Carrie Ann Circle, Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and our city planner, James Sisk, will also present this item.
Ms. Thompson has come to us. I believe she's already operating, and the situation was that she was misinformed that she was not in the city limits. So she's already passed her state regulations and been operating to some extent prior to this. However, it was brought to our attention and hers that she was in the city limits, and then she came to us to do the proper paperwork for a conditional use to have an in-home daycare for up to 10 children.
Okay, any further questions for Mr. Sisk? Any questions in the audience? If not, do we have a motion to move this forward?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item F, the city council will consider a proposed ordinance establishing procedures for the disclosure of potential conflict of interest and substantial interest for certain municipal officers. Our city manager will present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an annual item that that you're required to address that just spells out the requirements and the procedures for you as council members and anyone that were to run for city council for them to file any kind of conflict of interest that may arise.
So this is pretty much a routine.
Yes, sir, it
item.
is. It's an annual item that we're just required by the state for you to. Right.
Okay.
I make a motion to move this to the August 2nd voting session.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Motion carries. Item G, the city council will consider a request to allow UTV, utility transportation vehicles, usage on the streets and highways in the city limits of Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Our city manager will also present this item.
So this is an item that has been asked about of me for a few different people and for a while now. And I did some research, and I have been a member of the Missouri City Managers Association since I started last July. And it was actually a hot topic on their email listserv a couple months ago. There's several cities that have been adopting an ordinance allowing UTVs on city streets. The one I drafted for you to start looking at is one that a lot of it is based off of Sykeston and kind of where they're at. They adopted one about 12 months ago it's been almost 18 months ago now that they've put in place. It kind of spells out the requirements. They're required to have safety equipment, they're required to have seat belts, they're required to have insurance and provide documentation to the city to receive a permit, an annual permit to operate. They'd get a sticker to put on it that shows that they're licensed in the city. There are rules and regulations. This is for city streets. It doesn't allow operation on state highways, which after talking about it some today with a couple of folks, that may have been something I should have spelled out a little easier, because you may not necessarily know Westwood is a state highway, Pine Street is a state highway, of course Highway 53 is, Ditch Road is a state highway. They're not allowed to be operated on state highways other than to cross them. There is a kind of looking at other cities that they charge a $15 a year permit fee. Just thought it'd be something to bring for you for discussion. I know from talking to the city manager and the mayor in Sykeston, this was something I think they discussed for quite a while before they made any decisions. So something I thought we could start the discussion on and see where it goes from there.
I was really surprised when I started talking to people about it. I need to find out more.
Yeah, exactly.
I was really shocked at the people who said, oh, please don't.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, maybe I better find out more.
My only question was, like, in my head when I, first was reading over our packet was, if we were Donovan Van Buren, I could really see a use for this, like campground to, the river or things like that.
Sure.
Being that the state doesn't allow it. So my thought is, am I going to ride it like 14th to Sylvan, like from my house down the road, and around Big Bend and home. Like, I don't know that, not that I'm necessarily against it, I just don't know in Poplar Bluff the point of it.
Sure.
Like, how does it move us forward in any way is just my question. And not that I'm against it, just I don't know how anyone else feels about it. I just don't, I'm not sure of how it helps us propel in any direction.
Sure, yeah.
And
I'm like Barbara, I've had several people that I have just kind of touched base with on it I haven't found one person that's for it. And like Jerica, I don't know what the benefit would be. And I do have in my ward some people that are already using these on the street, and they go very quickly, and it's usually people under the age of that shouldn't be driving them on the streets with them. I just don't see a need for it.
And my problem with it is the liability aspect. Should one hit my vehicle, most of them does not have liability insurance for that.
And that is one of the requirements.
That's a big concern.
Yeah, that is one of the requirements for the city to issue them a permit, is for them to show proof of insurance at the time. At the time.
Yeah.
They can show proof.
At the time.
They,
Yeah.
you know, they pay,
Yes.
and then they'll
Yes.
forget to pay, like
Pay
in the
for a
winter, we're
month.
not using those, and they do.
And-
But then a lot of companies don't allow them to be used on,
Yeah,
it's like exclusion, so they might show you insurance, but unless you read the actual policy, it may not be worth the paper it's
Sure.
written on
Sure.
for city street use.
yeah.
And one more thing I had too is those vehicles were actually designed for soft
That's right.
territory. They were not, those tires on most of them were not designed for hard surfaces, and they handle a lot differently on hard surfaces than they do on dirt and gravel. So that's going to be another concern, and you know, I'm just afraid that it's really going to be a bad deal.
Sure.
You know.
I spoke with Chief Whiteley just to kind of get his input on it, you know, as as someone who would be enforcing it, you know, and
Yes.
the police department didn't seem to have a problem with it. They seemed that it would be safer than maybe scooters. But in my personal opinion, and other council members may feel differently, I would really like to maybe see it tabled for a little bit to give us time to speak to the community and get their thoughts and opinions. And, you know, I don't want to see it necessarily go away, because, you know, if it's something that we see over time may be a benefit to us of some sort.
Sure.
I would just like maybe a little more time to do research, to talk to other cities that maybe don't have things like I spoke of, like a river that people travel to a lot with campsites or things. You know, that in my head is kind of what stuck out at first. But if it's something that can maybe be, you know, worked around, like I said, I'm not opposed to it. I would just like to see.
Is there any other council person or anyone from the audience that would like to comment additionally? Yes, ma'am.
I want to say thank you
Could-
to Chris for helping me get this on the agenda. And my
Could you approach the
I didn't fill out the
podium? That's fine. You go ahead and state your name and
I want to
address,
say
please.
Sherry Evans, and I live in Butler County, have my entire life.
Okay, what is your address?
2153 County Road 451.
Thank you.
The reason I was requesting maybe to consider getting permits for the town is there are quite a few people that live out in the rural community that, well, we don't intend to tear up anything, and we all do have insurance. And it's nice when you're riding in the winter to be able to come into town and fuel your rig, have some coffee, stuff like that, and obey all the rules. If there's any questions that you might ask now, my insurance policy covers me anywhere I'm legal to drive, and it's $200 a year. I mean, the liability insurance is cheap on these things. I have permits for a lot of the other towns. I guess you can't call them cities. I haven't got one for Sykeston because I myself have no reason to ride over there. I've got one for Donovan, one for Van Buren, one for Eminence, and I live close enough to Poplar Bluff that if I'm just out riding the county roads, and there are a lot of county roads that lead into Poplar Bluff, the new 8 points, you can ride right to it till you get to the city limits. You know, you might like to pop into Walmart and buy some milk. You know, and I have paid $20. You guys need to raise the fee.
$250 for the city being the village road drive. And a lot of people.
And I want to thank Steve Cookson for coming. He'd helped me do some of the research. Talked to Hardy Billington. Hardy said, oh, yeah, I would like to ride my rig into town. He said, I'm okay with that. I talked to Daryl Atchison. I don't know him personally. He's on his way to Branson, or he said he would have come with me. And he had some of the same questions that you all had about you need to have a driver's license. Those 12 and 8-year-old kids driving around, even if they're, I mean, it's illegal, period. So they need to be stopped.
And they have been, but they still do it again.
Right, that's a parental problem.
Right.
Don't know what the fines are for that. If somebody's misbehaving, give them a ticket. Do you have anything to add, Steve?
Can I ask you a question while
Sure.
you're here? So someone, just because of the whole, the state roads you aren't able to drive on those. So if I live in the county on a county road, how am I going to get to town without getting...
There is a map available that shows all the county roads, and you'd be surprised.
How you can get straight into town without
Yes,
getting
you can.
on a state highway?
Yep. Yes, you can. Do you live out on TT?
No, I have to live in city.
You do? Oh, okay.
So.
But yeah, you can get from almost any direction
Okay.
coming from into Poplar Bluff. There are county roads that you can access to get to the city limits.
Okay.
Without, other than just crossing a state road.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the only thing I really had to add was a few years back when I was serving in the
Ms.
legislature. Do you need
Steve,
to
would you-
introduce myself?
Yes, sir, please.
yes.
That's a standard.
My name is Steve Cookson, and I don't live in the city. I live just out there past Batson Mini Farms out that way. But a few years ago, I had the privilege of serving part of Butler County in the state assembly. And during that time, I got approached by some ATV dealers that, they were interested in maybe a state law that kind of outlined all the things that you guys are concerned about and everything. And so I filed a bill and that was going to start all of a sudden. I had a lot of people want to come and visit with me, and so we had to have some meetings, and insurance people wanted to know about it, the highway patrol, how the impact was on that, and just a lot of the people that I served at that time with a Speaker of the House that was very wise, and he talked to me about it at that time, and we both decided that at that time, as far as a state law, we needed to kind of back up on it just a little bit and defer this to more local entities like counties and cities, and that there are a lot of players in this and a lot of things to consider, such as a licensed driver, the safety equipment that are on that, and insurance. I guarantee you the first person that came to me was the insurance people, and the liability and all that. So, you folks are very intelligent, and it seems like you got a plan, but, and you've already done some research, Mr. Winters. Might want to form a little committee and talk about this and, maybe decide what direction you want to go, if you want to go in any direction at all. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, sir. I believe it's apparent there is some divisiveness somewhat, or the question of divisiveness over this issue.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to table this item.
Do we have a
Get some
second?
further information.
I had a second over here.
So is this a general table?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion to table generally and a second.
Let's table this generally.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? This item is tabled generally at this time. Item H, the City Council will consider an amendment to Section 120.460A, sick leave accrual accumulation. Mr. Winters will present this item.
So, we've been looking at several different areas for recruitment and retention of employees, and this one goes a little bit towards the retention and a little bit towards the recruitment side of that. Right now, except for some employees that are covered by some union contracts, employees of the City of Poplar Bluff can accrue a maximum of 900 hours of sick leave. However, some of the folks in the city, such as the dispatchers, police officers, firefighters, can accrue a maximum of, the police officers and dispatchers is 1,040 hours, which amounts to 6 months. Firefighters is a different, I think it's 1,400 hours, 1,440, but that equates to 6 months for them also. So what I am asking you to consider doing is changing the ordinance from a maximum of 900 to a maximum of 1,040 sick hours that all employees that aren't covered by union contracts can accrue. We are in negotiation. I'm sorry?
That's only additional 44 hours?
140. 900 to 1,040. We are in negotiations with the street department on their union contract, and that is also one of their requests as well. We've got supervisors that the people they supervise have better benefits when it comes to this than the supervisors do. I know I've been asked by several of the departments to consider this. I think it's been discussed for going back a couple of years, so I thought I'd bring it up to discuss it tonight and get your thoughts and input. And
I think it's a good incentive, like you said, for a future employees anyway, and to kind of even it up.
Is there any further questions from the council?
Motion to move this to the voting session held on August 2nd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item I, the City Council will review a grant agreement with the Missouri Department of Economic Development Community Development Block Grant Program regarding an infrastructure street paving project. Mr. Winters will present this item.
back a few weeks ago, I'd announced that we'd gotten notification that we'd been awarded this community development block grant to pave some city streets. This is the formal agreement between the city and the state of Missouri's Economic Development Department for that grant. It's kind of the first step in us receiving it to eventually get to spend it and pave some streets. So
I make a motion to move it to the August 2nd voting session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item X, action required items. Item AA, Bill number 8323, the City Council will take action on an ordinance regarding an addition to the electrical code policy to include an emergency electrical disconnect for commercial buildings.
Motion for first reading of bill number 8323.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Counselor?
An ordinance amending the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri Code of City Ordinances, Section 500.040, by amending said section relating to emergency electrical disconnect for commercial buildings.
Motion for second reading of bill number 8323.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Counselor?
An ordinance amending the City of Poplar Bluff, Missouri Code of City Ordinances, Section 500.4040, by amending said section relating to emergency electrical disconnect for commercial buildings.
Move for adoption of bill number 8323.
Second.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments? Roll call, Clerk Young.
Councilwoman Parson?
Yes.
Councilwoman Fox?
Yes.
Councilwoman Horton?
Yes.
Councilman Smith?
Yes.
Councilwoman Taylor?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Cornman?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes. Bill number 8323 is adopted. Item BB, bill number 8324, the City Council will take action on an ordinance relative to the IBEW Local 702 Union Agreement between the City of Poplar Bluff and the Poplar Bluff Police Department's dispatcher group.
Motion for first reading of bill number 8324.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Counselor?
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a collective bargaining agreement between the City of Poplar Bluff and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Local 702 for its employees and the City of Poplar Bluff Police Department dispatchers.
Motion for second reading of bill number 8324.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Counselor?
An ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a collective bargaining agreement between the City of Poplar Bluff and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 702, for its employees and the City of Poplar Bluff Police Department dispatchers.
Motion for adoption of bill number 8324.
Second.
Any further questions or comments? If not, roll call, Clerk Young.
Councilwoman Fox?
Yes.
Councilwoman Horton?
Yes.
Councilman Smith?
Yes.
Councilwoman Taylor?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Cornman?
Yes.
Councilwoman Parson?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes. Bill number 8324 has been adopted. Item 11, the City Council of the City of Poplar Bluff will meet in a closed meeting in which they will discuss such matters which are exempted under the open meeting laws, section 610.021.1, RSMO, .2, .3, .9, .11, .12, .13, and .14 RSMO. Roll call, Clerk Young.
Councilwoman Parson?
Yes.
Councilwoman Fox?
Yes.
Councilwoman Horton?
Yes.
Councilman Smith?
Yes.
Councilwoman Taylor?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Cornman?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes. Do we have a motion to move into the closed session after the city manager's report?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Mr. Winters?
You know, I normally have to have some notes here to remember what I was going to talk about during my manager's report. I didn't make any today. You know, if you saw the Facebook post from the Chamber of Commerce today, they did announce that they purchased a little over 50 acres on Fair Street and 142. That's exciting for us as the Chamber begins to work to develop a new industrial park to recruit new businesses in town. You know, their industrial park, and we have a bad problem in Poplar Bluff. Our industrial park is full, and they're out of space to be able to recruit new manufacturers to town. So with this purchase and the grant we're going to start working on that we discussed earlier tonight, we'll move that forward and develop that into a marketable piece of property so that we can attract some industries to town. It's good to have retail, it's good to have restaurants, but it's great to have that strong manufacturing base that employs so many, if not only our residents, but Butler County residents and residents from around the region that come to town every day to work. And we're excited about that and seeing that move forward and see how that progresses. You know, the other hot topic around town has been mosquitoes.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
We're looking at some options that some things that we might be able to do between now and the end of the year. Councilwoman Parsons has put me on task. I am looking into what's Stuttgart, Arkansas. Stuttgart, is that correct?
Yes.
Stuttgart, Arkansas, what they're doing. They evidently have a mosquito abatement program that's kind of first class down there. So we're looking to find what other communities are doing, to see if there's other things that we can implement going forward in future years. So it is definitely, I know that I've heard from the public, I know you have heard from the public, and it's something that we're going to see what we can do between now and the end of the summer, and maybe have a better plan in place for summers going forward. So that's really all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, well, thank you, sir. If there's no further business before this regular meeting, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.